By late morning, I was in a glass conference room with two people who had never fixed anything more complex than a stapler. Denise Marlowe from HR had a notebook open and the damp smile of a person practicing sympathy. Beside her sat Cole Rask, our recently hired Chief Strategy Visionary, a title that sounded like a fortune cookie trying to get health insurance. My uptime board was still flawless, 100%, week after week. No red alerts, no midnight pages, no desperate chorus in chat about failed jobs or missing statements. I had built our core automation to run quietly, watchfully, ready to bite only when necessary. Cole leaned back. Lena, your work has been tremendous. You have made everything so efficient that there is not enough work to justify your position. Denise nodded. This is not a termination. It is a completion of scope. I stared at her. So, I succeeded, and the reward is being removed. Cole spread his hands. It is a compliment, really. When a platform maintains itself, we have to be lean. Lean, I repeated. The word tasted like burnt coffee and decisions made in parking lots. And severance? I asked. Denise's pen stopped moving. Since this is not classified as a dismissal, severance does not apply under the current policy. Policies are always very clear when they are about not paying you. I nodded once. Understood. Cole's smile softened into what he probably believed was kindness. No hard feelings. The systems are stable. The team can manage. You documented everything, right? I had documented everything. Runbooks, diagrams, maintenance guides, and an internal site called Lantern Docs, because I believed in leaving lights on for people who might someday need to escape a burning building. The trouble is that people who love burning buildings do not read lantern instructions. Yes, I said. Everything is there. Denise slid a folder across the table. The exit packet was printed on paper so thin it could have been used to wrap embarrassment. Your access will be disabled shortly. Please return your badge at reception. Shortly meant later. Later meant the world still had a door unlocked. As I stood, Cole asked, Any advice for the team? Do not confuse silence with safety, I said. Silence is often just the system being polite. He laughed, thinking I was making a nerd joke. Denise laughed because HR laughs like a reflex. I walked out with my badge still active and my trophy still shining behind me. Outside, the air was cold and clean. I should have felt free. Instead, I felt like a matchbook with one match left, and someone had finally given me a reason to strike it. Northbridge did not remove my access right away, because Northbridge believed checklists were the same thing as competence. Their offboarding process was a relay race run by people who did not like running. HR assumed security would disable me. Security assumed IT would handle service accounts. IT assumed the cloud would grow a conscience. Meanwhile, my credentials kept working, because most of the automation ran under Lantern SVC, a service identity I had created and guarded from the sort of accidental optimization that ends in lawsuits. Troy Nettle, the new infrastructure lead, asked for one last wrap-up utility before my account went dark. Troy was not evil. Troy was just confidently unqualified, like a toddler with a power drill. He wore a fleece vest indoors, as if the air conditioning had personally insulted him. We need a housekeeping script, he said in late afternoon. Archive logs, clean temp directories, rotate snapshots, something that keeps things tidy. Sure, I said, smiling the way you smile at a stranger stepping into traffic. I wrote it that evening and named it Sanitize Sweep because corporate people love words that sound like soap. It was genuinely useful. Modular functions, verbose logging, guardrails, and comments so clear they could teach a night class. It also used a small configuration file, because nobody at Northbridge read those unless the file was on fire. In that config, under a section labeled Archive Behavior, I included a toggle called drift_mode. The description was plain. When enabled, snapshot replication is paused for maintenance. Disable immediately after maintenance completes. It was not a trap, it was a doorstop, a normal doorstop. The problem is that doorstops are only harmless when someone remembers to remove them. During a migration rehearsal weeks earlier, I had enabled drift_mode to prevent test artifacts from replicating into the real archive. Afterward, I intended to switch it back. Then Cole arrived with his slogans and his spreadsheet scalpels, and the company decided I was a completed scope. So drift_mode stayed enabled. Not hidden, not encrypted, not sneaky. It was documented twice, including a warning in Lantern Docs. Do not leave this on. Sanitize Sweep also emailed a weekly summary to the infrastructure mailing list, what it cleaned, what it archived, and whether replication was paused. It was the kind of polite, boring report people delete without reading, because no news feels like the same thing as good news. I committed Sanitize Sweep, opened a pull request, and added Troy as reviewer. He skimmed the code like terms of service, fast enough to feel responsible, slow enough to miss the part that matters. He approved it within minutes and wrote, "Looks clean. Great legacy." Legacy. People use that word like it means timeless. Most of the time it means fragile and misunderstood. On my final walkthrough, I handed Troy a laminated checklist. Run this weekly, I told him. If you see replication paused, check drift_mode. He flashed a thumbs up. We will. Cole wandered by near early evening, clapped me on the shoulder and said, "This will run itself." It will run, I said. It will do exactly what it is told. When I dropped my badge into the return box, it felt lighter than it should have. I walked out without looking back. Back inside Northbridge, drift_mode stayed on, patient and quiet, like a note nobody bothered to open. The silence after leaving a loud workplace has a texture. It is soft, and it keeps trying to convince you that you imagined the whole thing. For a few days, I woke up expecting an alert. None came. My apartment was so quiet, I could hear my old desk fan complaining from the closet. My cat, Pixel, followed me room to room with the suspicious devotion of an animal who thinks unemployment is contagious. I did not grieve for Northbridge. I grieved for the version of myself that believed excellent work bought loyalty. By early afternoon on a gray weekday, I had an LLC, a bank account, and a name, Candleknife Consulting, a candle for the lights I left behind, a knife for the part of me that had stopped asking nicely. My website was simple. I build systems that survive executives. My first client found me through a vendor who owed me a favor. They were a payments firm called Harbor and Hollis, the kind of company that uses the word trust like a security blanket. Their interim CTO, a careful man named Samir Joss, met me in a conference room that smelled like whiteboard cleaner and fear. "We heard you understand operational risk," he said. "I lived inside it," I replied. "I just stopped letting it live inside me." They hired me for an audit. I walked their infrastructure like a crime scene: storage policies, retention thresholds, replication paths. I found silent failure points in less than a day, the sort of issues that do not scream, they simply wait. I fixed what I was paid to fix. I billed what I was worth. And still, some part of me kept an ear turned toward Northbridge, like you keep listening for thunder after the storm skips your street. The news came through a former coworker, Margot, who had kept my number because she liked my sarcasm and feared my scripts. She sent me a screenshot from Northbridge's announcement channel. Cole had posted a graphic: streamlined spring, bold letters over smiling faces holding tablets. The caption bragged about hands-free resilience and operational overhead reduced. There was a picture of Cole looking proud, like a man who had just invented electricity by turning on a lamp. They did not mention my name. Ghosts do not get credited for keeping the lights on. I saved the screenshot anyway, not for spite, for records. A few days later, Margot forwarded me a weekly email from the automation list I used to maintain. Northbridge had not removed her access either, because they treated access control like a suggestion. The email subject was boring: sanitized sweep summary. The body was worse: cleanup complete, Archive complete. Replication paused. True. I laughed, sharp enough to startle Pixel off the couch. Margot texted right after. They never read these. Troy calls them noise. Noise is how you know the building is still standing, I wrote back. At Harbor and Hollis, I finished my audit and presented a slide titled, Silence is not evidence. Samir nodded with the exhausted gratitude of a person who has seen real disasters and wants none. That evening, I drafted a clause for my future contracts, an executive surcharge for companies that fired the only person who understood their own systems. I did not know when Northbridge would learn to read a summary email. I only knew the emails kept arriving, and drift_mode kept saying true, like a tiny confession nobody bothered to hear. The first cough showed up in late evening, buried in a message thread no one respected. Someone in quality asked why last week's transaction logs looked thin. A junior engineer replied, probably pruning. Troy added a thumbs up emoji, which is how you can tell a person has never watched a ship take on water. Over the next few days, departments discovered small holes in their history. Legal could not pull older contract revisions. HR's incident notes stopped at the edge of the retention window. Finance tried to reconcile records and found gaps shaped exactly like, "We will deal with it later." Northbridge dealt with it by posting more streamlined spring graphics. Then early morning arrived, and so did the purge. Retention policies are not dramatic. They follow instructions with the tenderness of a guillotine. Northbridge's monthly cleanup job ran, saw older snapshots beyond the allowed window, and removed them. It assumed replication had been making fresh copies elsewhere. Replication had been paused, because drift_mode was still true. By late morning, panic hit the infrastructure channel. Archive folders are empty. Is this a mount issue? Another engineer replied, storage looks healthy. A third, no errors, no alerts. No alerts, because the system had done exactly what it was told. By early afternoon, an incident room appeared, then another with the word EXEC in the title, which is a sure sign that reality has started charging interest. Cameras flickered on across a grid of faces. People spoke in short sentences, as if longer ones might summon liability. Cole Rask joined late, breathing a little too fast. He asked, "How bad is it?" Nobody answered at first, because bad was too small a word. They brought in an outside recovery firm. The consultants asked for logs. Northbridge offered them the very thing that was missing. It would have been funny if it had not been expensive. Someone finally opened Lantern Docs. They searched, replication paused, and found the drift_mode section. The warning icon, the plain description, the sentence, disable immediately after maintenance completes. Troy's face did something strange on camera, like his soul tried to crawl out through his ears. That is, in the config, he whispered. Yes, someone snapped. Why is it enabled? Troy swallowed. It was enabled during rehearsal. Lena probably. He stopped, because saying my name felt like summoning a storm. A director asked, "Who approved the script?" An engineer answered, "The pull request is approved by Troy. The deployment ticket is signed off." Cole's jaw tightened. So we have an internal failure. By late afternoon, regulatory emails began arriving. Northbridge handled financial records and personal data, the kind that makes watchdogs wake up hungry. The compliance lead said, "We have to notify clients." Cole asked, "Can we restore?" The recovery firm answered, "There is nothing corrupted, nothing crashed. The data was simply not preserved." Margot texted me one line, "People are crying in the stairwell." I did not gloat. I just felt a calm settle into place, heavy and exact. Revenge does not always shout. Sometimes it just follows policy and waits for adults to ignore warnings. Northbridge had fired the lighthouse keeper, then complained the coast was dark. And now, in a building full of dashboards, they were learning what I told them. Silence is often just the system being polite. By the time Northbridge admitted they needed me, The messages came in waves. The first was from an address labeled Office of Technology, corporate for We do not know who is in charge. The subject line screamed urgent support request. The body was polite in the way a burning house is polite. We are reassessing our infrastructure strategy, it read. We would appreciate a conversation regarding consulting engagement for recovery and future-proofing. Future-proofing. As if the future politely waits while you underpay the people who know where the weak joints are. I did not answer right away. I made coffee. I let the silence sit, because silence is the only language Northbridge ever respected more than words. When I replied, it was brief. Happy to discuss terms, my rate has changed. A second email arrived from Cole Rask himself, stuffed with teamwork phrases and missing one important noun: accountability. Margot texted me updates anyway. They are blaming vendors. Then, they are blaming Troy. Then, they are blaming maintenance. I opened my contract template and added a line item called the drift tax, applied when a company calls after ignoring documentation and weekly summaries. I set my rate high enough to make a budget spreadsheet cry. Then I scheduled the call for late evening, because dramatic people do not do revenge at lunchtime. Cole appeared on video with a beige background, as if neutral colors could erase consequences. Denise Marlowe was there too, blinking hard, with the anxious posture of someone who has learned that policy does not protect you from physics. Cole started with, "Lena, we value your expertise." "You valued it until it cost money," I said. Denise tried to smile. "We are hoping you can help us restore what was lost." "I can help you understand what happened," I corrected. "Restoration is a different word." A lawyer joined and spoke in sentences that avoided verbs. I let him finish. Then I said, Drift_mode was documented. It was flagged in weekly summaries. It was approved in a pull request. If you want to call it sabotage, you have to explain why your own people signed it and ignored it. Silence. Heavy, honest silence. Cole cleared his throat. "So, what do you need?" "A signed contract," I said. "Upfront payment. And you will follow the runbook without improvising, because improvisation is how we got here." Denise asked, "And the drift tax?" "I am glad you read the list," I replied. They signed. Pride is expensive, but regulators are more expensive. A few days later, I walked into Northbridge as a visitor, not an employee. My badge was temporary and labeled guest in big letters, like a reminder that the building did not own me. In the war room, I projected the drift_mode page. "This is not magic," I said. "It is maintenance. It requires memory. And you fired memory." I implemented real checks, real alerts, and a policy that failed closed instead of failing quietly. When I left near early morning, Cole did not offer a trophy. He offered a handshake. His hand shook. I shook it anyway. Not for him, for me. Revenge, it turns out, is sweetest when it arrives as an invoice that cannot be argued with.